The history of the tuk-tuk, also known as the auto rickshaw, is disputed. Some claim the first tuk-tuk was in 1947, others claim it was 1934. We take a look at these claims and put a spanner in the works, as we believe the first tuk-tuk dates back to 1886. The claim of first tuk-tuk being 1947 comes from Italy, with the claim the Piaggio Ape was the first tuk-tuk. There is no doubt that in its modern style Piaggio Ape was the first. However, there were tuk-tuks 61 years before Piaggio designed the Ape. Some say the first tuk-tuks were in 1934 and were Japanese three-wheelers were being exported from Japan to Thailand in 1934, but were they tuk-tuks? In our view, they were not tuk-tuks, as they were just motorbikes with three wheels. The front of them was simply a motorbike with a two-wheeled axle fitted at the rear. So you can hardly call them a tuk-tuk. Who did make the first tuk-tuk? We believe it was the Germans. In 1886 the Germans applied for a patent for a vehicle that had three wheels, two at the rear and one at the front. The vehicle also had a single-cylinder rear engine and was steered by a handle. Notice how similar that is to today's tuk-tuks. Surely it has to be a tuk-tuk. The engine even made a tuk-tuk tuk-tuk sound as it drove by, and it is that sound that the name tuk-tuk comes from. So the first tuk-tuk was also the first car. Newspapers reported on July 1886 the first outing of the Benz patent motor car, which was a three-wheeled car. For anyone that makes the claim a tuk-tuk is not a car, because it only has three wheels, the fact that the first car also had three wheels proves you are wrong. First self-propelled vehicle. If you take away the petrol engine factor of the tuk-tuk, you could even date the tuk-tuk back to 1769, when Nicholas Joseph Cugnot invented the first self-propelled vehicle. It was powered by steam and had three wheels. The Japanese claim to the first tuk-tuk. The claim that the first tuk-tuk comes from Japan dates back to 1934. However, research seems to point to these being more of a motorcycle adapted into three-wheelers by putting a two-wheeled axle on the rear. The Japanese Ministry of Posts and Telecommunications donated about 20,000 used three-wheelers to Southeast Asia. We are unsure of the date of this. We believe these Japanese three-wheeled motorcycles are far too close to motorcycles to be classed as tuk-tuks. Rally car. While the British do not claim to make the first tuk-tuk, they were, in fact, making vehicles that could be classed as tuk-tuks back in 1929, so they predate both Japan's claim and that of Piaggio. It was the rally car that led to the formation of what turned out to be one of the best known manufacturers of three-wheeled cars in the world, the Reliant Company, the company that went on to build the famous Reliant Robin. The Rally car was a three-wheeled delivery van with motorbike-like controls in the early models. It was designed to carry 500 weight, 254 kilograms, and was powered by a 598cc single-cylinder engine. It was fitted with a 3-speed gearbox plus a reverse gear. The price of a brand new Rally car back in the 1930s was £80, 5,119 peso. In later models of the Rally car they put two seats in the front and switched from motorbike type control to a steering wheel. They also increased the size of the engine to 750cc. Piaggio Ape. World War II had hit Italy hard and the economy was in a poor way. Four-wheeled cars were beyond the reach of many Italians at the time. There was also the fact that many of the narrow streets of Italy were not suitable for four-wheeled vehicles. The roads in Italy were also in a bad state of repair after World War II. Italy needed a way to get the country moving again. During World War II, Piaggio had been building fighter aircraft, but their Pontedera factory had been demolished by bombing. Because of this, they needed to rebuild. and the fact the end of the war meant there was little demand for fighter aircraft, Enrico Piaggio decided to move production away from aeroplanes and do something to help Italy's transport problem. Firstly, to get people moving again, Piaggio started to build scooters, and that solved the problem of people being able to get about, but did nothing to solve the problem of moving goods. In 1947, Corradino D'Ascanio, who was an aircraft designer and also the inventor of the Vespa scooter, decided what was needed to help Italy's reconstruction was a lightweight commercial vehicle. It was decided that a three-wheeled vehicle was best suited for the job. Enrico Piaggio, the son of Piaggio founder Arnaldo Piaggio, liked Corradino D'Ascanio's design and put it into production. The very first Piaggio Ape was mechanically the same as a Vespa scooter, but with two rear wheels and a flatbed on top of the rear axle. When they first advertised the Piaggio Ape, it was advertised as a Vespa car. It came with the choice of three engines, a 50cc, 125cc or a 150cc. It was not until 1964 that a cab was fitted to the Piaggio Ape to protect the driver. Ape in Italian means bee, and it got its name from the bee-like sound the engine made. Many different body designs were added to the Ape, such as van, tankers, passenger and even fire trucks. The adding of the passenger body saw the Piaggio Ape being used as a taxi, as many tuk-tuks are today. We suspect that Corradino D'Ascanio never dreamed his invention would take off in so many other countries and create what has become a national icon in India, and 72 years later would still be in production. For many years a Piaggio Ape was built in Italy and India, but in 2013 all production of the Piaggio Ape was moved to India. Lambretta three-wheeler. We could not write about the history of the tuk-tuk without mentioning the Lambretta tuk-tuk, the reason being it was a Lambretta tuk-tuk that started my love of the tuk-tuk. The year was 1979. I was a 22-year-old soul boy and a scooter boy. My first love was Northern soul music and my second love was Lambretta scooters. Most weekends were spent at all-night dances in places such as Wigan Casino, but bank holiday weekends were different. They were for scooter rallies and we would ride our scooters hundreds of miles to attend these scooter rallies. The event was Southend Scooter Rally, organized by the Lambretta Club of Great Britain. It was a time when the interest in scooters was growing again, and over 1,000 scooters turned up for what at the time was the biggest scooter rally since the 1960s. We were walking around looking at all the scooter and there it was, a Lambretta three-wheeled fire engine. I instantly fell in love with it. It was the first tuk-tuk I had seen in my life and my love of tuk-tuks started. Lambra three-wheeler. In the second part of the 1940s, Vespa and Lambretta were both building scooters and there was a lot of rivalry between not just the companies, but also the owners. It was a rivalry that in company terms lasted until 1997, and for owners continues today. As already mentioned, Vespa introduced a three-wheeler in 1947, so Lambretta was sure to follow, and in 1949 they introduced their first three-wheeler, the Lambra FB. There is evidence that Lambretta had a three-wheeler before 1949, but it is unsure if they were for sale to the public. Lambretta called the three-wheelers Lambra after the name of the river that ran close to their factory. It was another 10 years before they added a cabin to it, making it more like the tuk-tuks of today. This model was called the Lambra FD. Bajaj three-wheeler. The Bajaj three-wheeler was a latecomer to the history of the tuk-tuk, as it was not until 1971 they started to produce their own auto rickshaws. Before that year they were building the Piaggio Ape under license. Despite being a late starter, Bajaj has gone on to become the largest manufacturer of three-wheeled cars in the world, and for that very reason, we will be doing a separate article on the history of the Bajaj auto rickshaw soon. History of the name tuk-tuk. While researching this article we made an interesting discovery. You will often read that the name tuk-tuk comes from the sound of the engine, and we believed this ourselves, and have even mentioned it in this article. However, we now believe this might not be correct. The reason we are no longer sure if it is correct is that we discovered in Italy they are called taxi. We cannot find what taxi means. If anyone can tell us, please let us know. It could be that tuk-tuk came first and taxi is just a shorter version of it. However, it does seem that the term taxi may have been in use before the term tuk-tuk, and before the tuk-tuk was in India. They claimed the term tuk-tuk came from the British that visited Asia, and named it tuk-tuk because of the sound the engine made. The fact we have discovered the word taxi was used before tuk-tuks arrived in India seems to point to it being a taxi before it was a tuk-tuk.